Welcome back, everybody. You've heard it said because pretty much everybody says it. You've got to think bigger, dream bigger, charge bigger, build bigger, and scale bigger. But there's one truth no one's really talking about. Let's talk. If your structure is weak, a bigger version does not create more freedom for you. It's actually just going to create more chaos. It's going to result in more clients to manage, albeit poorly, more projects to try to keep in your head and juggle, more team members depending on you for every single answer, more revenue moving through a business that still in some way feels fragile, and finally more pressure on a foundation that was never built to carry that weight. So if you've been telling yourself, maybe I just need to be more confident. Maybe I just have imposter syndrome. Or maybe I need to dream bigger. Or maybe I need to finally act like a CEO. This episode is for you. Today we're talking about what actually changes when a designer doesn't just start scaling, but starts scaling well. We're talking about that really big difference between motivational thinking and strategic thinking. We're talking about CEO thinking not as a personality trait, but as a decision-making framework. And we're talking about why scaling requires different decisions from you, not just bigger goals. So if you're ready to stop romanticizing growth, looking at other designers on Instagram and wondering what they're doing, and start building a business that can actually hold it, let's get into it. All right, let's make this real because I know what this looks like in the day-to-day life of a designer. You have a big vision. You do know you're capable of more. You know your work is strong and you know you have the ideas that could take your business somewhere bigger than where it is at right now. But in reality, it feels nothing like the version of success that you imagined because everyone's still coming to you. Your team is waiting on you, which makes all of you feel horrible. Your inbox is still controlling your day, and every project still has fingerprints on every little thing. Don't mishear me there. My fingerprints are still on the projects that I'm working on, but they're not on every little thing. Also, you are still reviewing, fixing, approving, explaining, re-explaining, following up, and carrying what results in the emotional load of the entire business. So you say you want to scale, but if 2 new projects land at once, all of a sudden your stomach drops. Yeah, and you say you want a bigger team. I hear you, but inside maybe you're secretly worrying that more people would mean just more management, more payroll, more problems, and more dependency on you. And you say you want to become that CEO that we've been talking about on this show for a while. But what you actually mean is you just want to stop drowning. Let's be clear. These are all not the same thing. Maybe you've had moments where revenue grew, but your life actually got worse. And I can relate to that. Back in the year when we grew 15x during COVID, my life got infinitely worse for a while. That's no joke. But we couldn't just stay in the pit and decorate it. We had to dig ourselves out. And that was done with processes and systems, which is why I love being the process princess. Maybe you've hit a stretch where the business looked successful from the outside, but internally it felt like it was held together with chaos. In fact, I spoke to a designer just a month ago who said to me, Katie, my face is everywhere. Everyone knows me. And my business is hanging on by a thread, and I made $30,000 last year. Or maybe you've already learned the hard way. The growth without structure is just a faster way to burnout. This is especially true in our industry because so many of us are exceptionally good at seeing what could be. We are visionaries by our very nature. It is in our DNA. It is in our blood because we are trained to imagine possibility. We see potential and we create beauty from complexity. But all gifts have another side. And that's where this strength can become a liability in business if we do not pair that vision with structure. Because a designer can imagine this incredible future and still be running the company in a way that makes that future impossible to ever achieve, let alone sustain. And that's the real tension we're talking about today, because I see that you're not lacking ambition. You're not lacking taste. Y'all have great taste. You are not lacking work ethic. One of my designers who I coach lovingly shared and was completely embarrassed. She's working 6 days a week, every single week. You're not even lacking vision. You have tons of vision. You may just simply be trying to scale with the same operating system that got you where you are today. And that right there is where most businesses get stuck. See, here's the misdiagnosis that I see all the time. Designers think the reason they are stuck is because they need to think bigger. They think maybe I'm playing too small. So you set bigger revenue goals. You decide you want a bigger team. You say you want higher end clients. And you talk about stepping into your CEO era, which we've talked about on this podcast. So don't think that there's anything wrong with that. We're talking about today is different. Yeah, you're busy creating a bigger vision board, a bigger target, a bigger identity, and that does all matter. I am not anti-vision. You can't go to where you don't see. But vision without infrastructure is called fantasy, folks. The problem is not usually that you are thinking too small. That's why you can design 10,000 square foot homes. The problem is that you are making growth decisions inside your business from the same level of thinking that created those current bottlenecks you're experiencing. Think about it this way. You're trying to multiply demand before you have multiplied your capacity. In fact, I just had this happen with my daughter, who wants a puppy so incredibly bad she can taste it. And my one question for her has become, what are you going to give up in order to make time for that puppy? Before you try to multiply adding more to your plate through demand, just like adding a puppy, do you have the capacity? You got to multiply your capacity first. What are you going to take away to make room for this demand? Are you trying to increase opportunity without increasing your operational clarity? Are you maybe trying to solve structural problems with motivational language, which, don't get me wrong, motivational language can be great, but it is the furthest thing that you need from solving structural problems. All of this just doesn't work because motivational thinking says, I just need to believe bigger. I need to believe in myself. I need to get rid of my imposter syndrome. Here's what strategic thinking asks. What exactly breaks in my business when volume increases? Let me give you another example. Motivational thinking says, I know I'm meant for more, and don't get me wrong, you are. But strategic thinking asks the question, what system, role, process, or decision standard is missing that is keeping this business dependent on me? Think about it this way. Motivational thinking gets you really excited. But strategic thinking gets you scalable. One is not wrong, but only one can actually hold the growth that you are desiring to achieve. And a lot of designers are inspired by the idea of becoming a CEO, but they still operate like the lead technician in their business. They're the lead artist, the lead problem solver, and the emotional regulator for the entire company. And that is exhausting. In fact, you might be listening to this and go, yeah, I still say yes too quickly. I still step in too often. I still make exceptions too casually, or I accept scope creep without billing for it. Maybe you still tolerate messy handoffs, vague roles. Maybe it's inconsistent delivery. Maybe you wait too long to address recurring issues. I'll never forget the coaching client that said, the window treatments have not gone in right the last 5 times and I don't know what to do. And I said, have you had a post-mortem after each one of these so it could have stopped back at number 1? What do your post-mortems look like? She goes, we just don't do them. I'm just getting annoyed. But that doesn't solve the problem, right? Maybe you're still confusing being needed with being valued. This is so easy, especially for my female listeners, because most of you are moms and you know that your value comes from being needed, or it did when your kids especially were little, business doesn't work that way. You need your business to launch, hopefully just like your kids launched. So when the business grows, if this is how you're feeling, guess what? The chaos follows. And then you start telling yourself, maybe I'm not built for scaling. And I want to call a huge timeout. Take a deep breath, because that is not the correct conclusion. The conclusion is that scaling exposed what your current business model can actually not support. Those are two very different things. So let's look under the hood. What's really happening here is that scaling requires a completely different kind of decision making. See, scaling isn't about louder confidence or bigger declarations or more pressure. It's about different decisions. CEO thinking is not just about having a vision. It is about building the conditions that allow the vision to actually survive and even thrive. It is the ability to solve bigger problems than those ones that are right in front of you, so you don't feel like you're putting out fires on a day-to-day basis before you even got out of bed. A designer-led business owner often spends most of their time solving immediate problems. And this is not where we want to be. The client needs a response. The install has changed. The vendor has messed up. The team member needs clarification. This presentation needs edits. The proposal has got to go out and the fire has got to be put out. And notice the theme as I prattle off all of those. It's about leadership being reactive. See, CEO thinking asks a higher level question. It asks, why does this kind of problem keep existing in the first place? Back to the window treatments. How did we get to the 5th window treatment install that isn't working? And when you can sit back and answer that question, all of a sudden that question changes everything. Because instead of solving the same issue 10 times, or in the case of the window treatments, not even solving it after 5, you start solving the condition that allows it to repeat. Instead of personally rescuing every situation, you're designing a business that reduces the need for rescue. And isn't that ultimately the goal? Can you imagine? And instead of staying close to every single task, you get close to the leverage points. And that, my friends, is called CEO thinking. It is not about becoming less thoughtful. It is about becoming more strategic. Let me give you an example. A reactive business owner often says, my team keeps coming to me with questions. Yeah, but here's what a CEO asks. Why are our decision standards unclear? What knowledge lives only in my head? What role expectations have not been defined? And where are there handoff gaps? Much different narrative, right? Let me give you a couple other examples. A reactive business owner says, I'm so overwhelmed every time we take on more projects. Whereas a CEO sits back and asks, what stage of the workflow is actually collapsing first, especially when we have volume? Is the bottleneck in onboarding? Is it in communication? Is it in procurement, design development, client education, team capacity? Let's dig deeper. One final example for you. A reactive owner says, I need better time management. Whereas the CEO asks, why is this business structured in a way that requires me to hold so many low-level decisions? When you can shift into those CEO questions that I just shared with you, scaling all of a sudden becomes not about doing more, it is about solving for more. Because those questions and ones like them allow you to solve for more complexity, to solve for more people, to solve for moving parts, consistency, and to solve for capacity without requiring more of you every single time. So when you start solving bigger problems, guess what happens? Your business changes. And let me define bigger problems, because this really does matter. These are not just higher stake client issues. See, bigger problems are things like, how do I build a team that does not rely on me as the constant translator? How do I make project delivery more consistent across different personalities? How do I create a clearer scope when it comes to boundaries so my profitability stops leaking? Or better yet, how do I build a contract, which coincidentally I've done for you, that includes the idea of scope creep? In fact, it counts on it and allows a simple email to amend the contract. Yeah, if you want to see that, I will put a link in the notes so you can take a peek at buying that. It's how do I structure communication so clients feel held without me being on call? The bigger problems are how do I create a brand that attracts better fit opportunities? How do I build decision making into the business so my team can move faster? And how do I know what only I should do and what I should never, ever be doing again? See, those are CEO questions. And here's what I want you to hear. The answer is not always grow faster. See, sometimes that answer is tighten the business, simplify the offer, clarify the role, document the process, stop making exceptions, buy a better contract that includes scope creep, hire slower and define better, and raise the standard before you raise the volume. And don't get me wrong, this is not small thinking. This is strategic thinking. See, a lot of people glorify expansion, but expansion without discipline is just really expensive. I want sustainable growth for you. I want profitable growth for you. And I want growth that actually increases your capacity, your freedom, your clarity, and your leadership. Not growth that just makes your business look bigger while your whole entire life is getting smaller. It's the last thing we want. Let's talk about that deeper CEO thinking. What does it actually look like when it comes to scaling? Because a CEO does not just ask, what do I want? A CEO asks, what kind of business would be required to deliver that consistently? That is a very different question. See, if you want to lead bigger projects, do you have the back end to support bigger projects? If you want a stronger team, do you have the role clarity, expectations, communication rhythms, and training pathways? If you want to step out of the weeds, have you actually decided what the weeds are? And if you want your firm to scale, have you identified what must become standardized and what must remain bespoke? Because that is where so many designers get tripped up. They think scaling means losing their creativity. Not true. Scaling means deciding where creativity belongs and where consistency matters more. Your client experience can still feel very elevated and personal, while your internal systems become tighter and more repeatable. In fact, the tighter your back end becomes, the more creative energy you free up for the places where your brilliance matters the most. This is why, if you haven't, go back and listen to the episode, Why Hiring an Assistant Designer is Not the Answer. See, CEO thinking is also about time horizon. A reactive owner makes decisions for this week, whereas a CEO is making decisions for this quarter, this year, and the next stage you want for your company. And that means you're willing to endure short-term discomfort for long-term strength. I know we certainly did the year we grew 15x. It wasn't comfortable for a minute, folks. And by not comfortable, I mean it felt like straddling a barbed wire fence. See, but as a CEO, you have to be willing to train even when it is slower at first. You have to be willing to document even when it feels tedious. You have to be willing to define roles even when the team is still small, so you can add those additional roles later. And you have to be willing to say no to revenue that creates operational drag. And I know that can hurt, especially in the moment. Finally, you have to be willing to remove yourself from work you are good at if it is not the highest use of your leadership. And this last one is so hard because often the thing you need to step back from is the thing you're amazing at. But being amazing at everything does not automatically mean you should keep doing it all forever. Sometimes the very skill that built the business becomes the thing that caps the business. And that is a hard truth. This is when you're actually ready to hire an assistant designer after you've hired all the other positions. But it is also a liberating one and it should be used with great discernment and great wisdom. Because once you see it, you can make different decisions. So what do you do with everything I've shared today? I've thrown a lot at you and you may feel overwhelmed. If you know you have a bigger vision, but you do not want bigger chaos, here's where I would start. Identify where your growth is currently breaking your business, not theoretically, but practically. When more clients come in, what gets harder first? Is it your response time? Is it the design quality? Maybe it's your procurement tracking or your team clarity. Maybe it's your cash flow or you're on meeting overload and clients are not respecting your boundaries. And let's internalize this for a minute. Maybe it's just your own nervous system. Find that first point of breakage. That is one of your real scaling problems. Once you find it, I want you to audit what only you can do versus what you are simply used to doing. And those are not the same thing. What truly requires your taste, your relationships, your final authority, your vision, and what if you just never hand it off well? Because maybe you're a little bit of a control freak and this is your baby. Yeah, you got to be honest here. A lot of founders stay over-involved because they have never built trustable structure around delegation. So they assume delegation doesn't work, when really unclear delegation does not work. Third, I want you to look for repeated questions because every repeated question is a sign back to the 5 bad window treatment installs. If your team keeps asking the same thing, guess what's missing? A system. If your clients keep misunderstanding the same thing, communication. There's a problem. There's a gap. If projects keep getting stuck in the same place, you probably have a workflow that is missing because repeated confusion is really good data. CEO thinking pays attention to patterns, not just incidents. All right, I want you to stop using your own availability as the operating system. And this is a huge one. Because if the business works because you're constantly available, see, that's not called leadership, that's called dependency. Your business needs decision filters, communication norms, meeting cadences, documented processes, and clear ownership. It cannot just run on access to you. Also, make sure you are solving for the next level before you sell the next level. Back to my daughter wanting a dog, but not wanting to take anything else off her plate. What does this mean in our industry? It means strengthening onboarding before increasing lead generation. Maybe it's cleaning up procurement before taking more projects. It might be defining team roles before making another hire. Or in the case of one of my coaching clients last week, she has a rock star on her team and she wanted to hire another person. And I said, why don't you take your rock star and give her more hours? It might mean getting financially clear before trying to double your revenue. And this is, well, yeah, it's not sexy. But this is the work that's going to give you the freedom that you want. And I'll say this too. Sometimes the most CEO thing you can do is not to ask, how do I get bigger? Sometimes a better question is, how do I get stronger? Because strong businesses can scale and fragile businesses, they can only stretch. Now, let's talk mindset because this is not just operational. There is usually a belief underneath all of this that keeps you stuck. And it sounds like this. If I were a real CEO, I would naturally think bigger. If I were more confident, I would be already scaling. If I want more, I should be able to handle more. If I slow down to fix structure, I'm losing momentum. If I don't stay involved, oh, those standards are just going to drop. And if I stop being the one everyone needs, I'll become less valuable. That last belief is huge because a lot of founders have quietly built their identity around being essential. They're the one with the answers, the one who catches everything, who smooths it all over and sees when no one else cares, and the business cannot function without them. And look, in the beginning, I imagine that was necessary. It was necessary in my firm. But eventually that identity becomes a ceiling you're just banging your head into over and over again because the new belief a scaling CEO needs is this: my value is not in being needed for everything. My value is in building something that works at a high level because of how I lead. Now that, friends, is a different kind of power. It is quieter. It is less performative. It is less emotionally validating in the short term for sure. But catch this, it is far more sustainable. Another mindset shift would be growth is not proof of worth. Growth is a design decision. And hear me loud and clear when I say you are not a better designer because you have a bigger firm. You are not more important because you have a larger team. You are not more successful because your calendar is full. The question is whether your business is becoming more aligned, more profitable, more resilient, more intentional, and most importantly, more able to support the life and leadership that you actually want. And that is the kind of scaling I care about. And that is the kind of CEO thinking I want for you. It's not ego growth, not chaos growth, not accidental growth. It's intentional growth. So let's bring this home. Everyone says think bigger, but bigger thinking is not what most design businesses are missing. They're missing structure, clarity, decision-making frameworks, and the willingness to solve bigger problems instead of just chasing bigger goals. Because bigger vision without structure, it just creates bigger chaos. And scaling does not happen because you just got more inspired. It happens because you made different decisions. You stopped reacting and started diagnosing. And you stopped overfunctioning and started designing systems. You stopped glorifying growth and started strengthening the business. And you stopped asking, how do I do more? And started asking, what has to change for this business to hold more? See that right there? That's CEO thinking. And I want to say this clearly, especially for the interior designer listening who feels the tension between being highly creative and wanting to become a strong leader. I just want to say you do not have to stop being a designer to become a CEO, but you do have to stop leading your company like your only job is to produce beautiful work. If you want to scale, your job is now bigger than that. Your job is to build a business that can deliver excellence consistently, profitably, and with increased capacity over time. That right there, friends, is the real work. And it is exactly the kind of work I love helping designers do, because this is where so many talented firm owners get stuck. You have the vision, you have the skill, you have the drive, but you're still carrying the business model that depends too heavily on you. So let's work on the things underneath growth, like structure, positioning, leadership, offers, team design, bottlenecks that are quietly capping your capacity. And most importantly, let's work on helping you think and decide like the CEO your next level requires, not in a way that makes you more corporate, but in a way that makes you more clear. Because as Brene Brown says, clear is kind. Not in a way that disconnects you from your creativity, but in a way that protects it. Because isn't that why you started your firm in the first place? And not in a way that makes your business look bigger on paper, but in a way that makes it stronger in real life. Because the goal here is not just more. The goal is better. Better business design, better leadership, better capacity, better decisions, better alignment between the company you want and the company you're actually building. So if this episode is hitting you in that spot, here's what I want you to do. Take an honest look at your business and ask yourself one question. What breaks first when growth shows up? That answer is going to tell you more than any vision board ever could. And if you're really ready to build a business that can actually hold the level of growth that you say that you want, this is exactly the kind of work I help interior designers do through Success by Design. We do not just talk about bigger dreams. We build the structure, the strategy, and that CEO clarity to actually support you. So come find me. I want to have a free conversation with you. Go to fixmydesignbiz.com. Again, fixmydesignbiz with a Z.com. And let's take the next step when you're ready, because your business does not need more hype. It needs stronger business design. And that is how real scaling happens. As always, your business should be working for you, not you working for it. Until next time, take care.